This is the Happy Families podcast with Dr. Justin Coulson. We're Luke and Susie, and this is the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Suze, a very important question that's come into the show. It has indicated that maybe as kids get older, that perhaps that we become a little bit more confused as parents. Because there's a lot of textbooks and a lot of predictability about 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds. And even though there are textbooks about teenagers, Suze, my guess is my memory of me being a teen is that we're pretty good at adapting once our parents think they've got it all sorted.
Yes.
And we've had a question come to the show
We
about
have.
that.
Mary wrote through and asked us how do you work with your teenager? And I think this is a really interesting question because we do talk a lot about the kids that are about our age, primary school kids, but teenagers, we need to address them as well, but we don't know much.
Yeah.
Dr. Justin Coulson does. Talking about teenagers, we know children do change, and it seems that just as we master one area of parenting, I don't know, they get a hormone kick or something and suddenly we're dealing with a whole different child again. And those teenage years are really critical years relationally with parents. How do we navigate those?
Let me respond to that by sharing a story
Okay.
and then a handful of ideas. So there's this farmer. He's an old, crusty farmer, been working on the farm for decades, and he's out doing chores one morning, and a government ute pulls into the driveway, and out gets a government worker, and he walks over to the farmer and says, "I'm here representing the federal government, and I'm here to inspect your farm for drugs." The farmer says, "I see." He says, Can I recommend to you that you, whatever you do, you don't look over in that paddock over there?
Well, that's good. He's
Okay.
just preparing.
Yeah.
That's right.
good.
So the government employee looks at the farmer and says, "Let me just explain to you who I am. I work for the federal government. I'm here to look over this entire farm for drugs and any other illegal activity that I think might be going on here. And I will look wherever I want." And just to state his case more emphatically, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, opened it up and flashed a badge and said, "Do you see this badge? This badge authorizes me to go anywhere I want on your farm." So the farmer stepped back and humbly apologized and said, "Okay, I'll get out of your way." A few minutes later, while the farmer's back doing the chores, he hears this noise over in the distance. He hears this voice saying, "Ah!" and he turns around and walks to the fence of the field that he'd told this government employee not to go to, and sees this employee running like crazy to get out of the field. And behind him, chasing him at approximately twice his speed, is a bull with great big horns. And this government employee is saying, "Help me, help me." And the farmer leans on the fence and calls out in a loud voice, "Show him your badge." And I think, our teenagers kind of become the bull.
I was wondering who the teenager was in the story.
And we pull out our badge and we show them the badge and we say, "I'm the parent."
Yeah.
And they say, "That badge doesn't mean anything to me anymore, Mum and Dad. I can do what I want. It's my life." In fact, the teenage anthem really is, "It's my life. I'll do what I want. Get out of my way." Yeah. Now, there's a handful of things that are going on with our teenagers. First of all, boys in particular, they experience a significant drop in empathy. In their brains, their brain is not wired for empathy at all. It drops around about the age of 12 or 13. But you couple that with these major tasks of adolescence. Teenagers are supposed to do two things so that they can become successful adults. Number one, they need to separate from us. And number two, they need to create an identity. Mm-hmm. And they can't create their own identity while they're hanging onto our coattails, while they're getting piggybacks from us. They've got to separate. And unfortunately, one of the major ways that they separate from us is by saying no, and it's my life. And the more we try to force them, the wider we make that chasm between us and them. The more we sort of say, "My house, my rules. I'm the parent. I've got the spine. I've got the backbone to stand up to you. If you don't like it, you can leave." Well, if we're doing that, all we're going to do is jeopardize the relationship. We're flashing that badge in the face of an angry bull. The interesting thing is that if we put the badge away And not that we have to become friends with our kids. There's this argument that's always out there. A parent's supposed to be their children's friends, or are they supposed to be parents? Well, we're always their parent. But we can be parents that have great relationships with our children. But we've got to let go of this whole authority complex. We've got to stop waving badges in people's faces and start working with our kids and saying, hey, I get this. This is hard for you. I'm here to help you, not tell you what to do.
Surely, though, as we prepare them for life beyond being a teenager at our house, like they're going to have bosses and they're going to have authority figures that if we don't, if the badge is irrelevant in this stage of life, aren't we setting them up for failure when they have to respect the badge in life when they're adults?
Most families will say, my kids drive me insane, but their school teachers say they're angels.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Do you know what I mean? Children behave differently in the public sphere to how they behave in that private sphere.
So do we.
And so
as
do
adults.
we. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I think that we need to get away from that fear that if I don't teach my kid right and they're not perfect in the home, then they're going to be destitute by the time they're 25 because they'll have ruined every relationship that matters.
Yeah.
It's not true. Our kids are supposed to separate from us and they're supposed to develop this identity. Oh, by the way, if we push them hard enough because they're trying to separate and we're getting all rule-focused, and they do need rules, please, I want to be clear, they do need rules, but I'll come back to that in a sec. If we're getting so heavily rule-focused and we keep pushing and pushing and pushing, they're not going to listen to us. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to their friends. And often they'll go to the same friends who are going through the same thing with their parents, and they get into this state of, our parents don't understand, our parents are dumb, our parents are just such a pain. And then they all say, well, what can we do to show them? And then they go and start doing things that are unhelpful. I love the quote, I don't know who said it, but there was I think it was Mark Twain, but I could be wrong, who said, when I was 14, I thought my father knew nothing. By the time I was 21, I couldn't believe how much he'd learned in the last 7 years. Because they do grow up, they do mature, and they do figure out that we're there. Yeah. This is what I would say if you feel like your kids are just driving you to despair and they're teenagers. Number one, what were you like when you were a teenager? Luke?
I was an angel. Okay, not a good example.
I was not a nice human being when I still need to improve even now that I'm an adult, but when I was a teenager I was not a nice human being at all. And most of us grow up to be much better than we were as teens.
Thankfully.
If that's the peak, we're all in trouble. The kids
True.
will get better and better as they get older. That's the first thing. The second thing is the relationship is key. Our relationship with them matters so much. And when you're at that point where you're despairing, just say to them, I'm just going to step back right now, but we're going to talk about it later. We're going to work this out because you matter more than anything. You've got to tell them. You've got to tell your teenagers they matter more than anything and be there for them.
It is the Happy Families podcast with Dr. Justin Coulson, and we are talking about raising teenagers today. A little bit more coming up very shortly.
Dr. Justin Coulson is one of Australia's most respected parenting voices. His seminars have equipped and empowered thousands of parents to make their families happier. But sometimes getting to a parenting seminar can be tough. There's work and other commitments. Then there's the issue of the children and babysitters. Now you can watch one of Dr. Justin's seminars from the comfort of your own home and at a time that works for you. Sit in on one of Dr. Justin's parenting seminars as he takes you from confusion to clarity. You'll learn how to build a strong connection with your children, how to really understand them, and how to get discipline right. What your child needs from you. A seminar from Dr. Justin Coulson. Download this 90-minute seminar now or purchase the DVD at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families podcast with Dr. Justin Coulson. Luke and Susie with you here as well as we talk today about raising teenagers.
But in our teen years, we know that's where we make some of the stupidest decisions in our life. And as the parents, we're just so desperate to protect them from bad consequences. Because I can go, I made stupid decisions, but I actually didn't I was fortunate enough to, not through good management, avoid the bad consequences. My kids might not be so lucky if they make one mistake, and it could. We have to try and protect them, and how?
Yeah, we do. We've got to have limits for them. They absolutely need limits, but we don't want to be forcing those limits on them because all that happens is they do what they have to do in the moment because we're there and they're under surveillance. But there's no buy-in. It's kind of like the police and I say this with the greatest of respect to the police, but the police are out there to keep us safe, to protect us, right? And what do we do whenever we see a policeman while we're driving? We slow right down. We do exactly what they want us to be doing. We are seen to be doing the right thing.
Even if we're not speeding.
That's true.
But once we're around the corner and they can't see us anymore, what do we all too often do?
Accelerate.
Let's say it's a 70 zone. We might only accelerate to 74.
Yeah.
You know, we're not really speeding, are we? Yeah. Well, actually, we're breaking the rules. Our kids might not really want to go out and break all the rules, but once we're out of sight, they will if we're constantly forcing them.
Yeah.
The best thing to do is, rather than doing things to them, is to work with them. I say this all the time. We've got to work with our kids. And the best way that we can do that is I think I've talked about the 3 E's with you at least once before. We need to explain what we expect and why. Provide a rationale. We need to explore how it is for them. See the world through their eyes, and then we need to empower them to make good decisions.
Yeah, good.
The data tells us that when we go through a process like that with our teenagers, they'll still do some dumb stuff. Every now and again, they might even get hurt. But they're much less likely to do as much dumb stuff, and they're much less likely to get hurt, and they're much more likely to make wiser, better decisions because they don't feel forced. They feel like they've made the decisions themselves with a bit of guidance from us.
Let's say you go through those steps and you go through them well, but there's still this impasse. And you've explained the rationale, you've gone through everything, and they still say, I think you're wrong, and you say, I think I'm right. You know, is there a line where you say, well, I'm boss?
It depends. It depends on what the issue is. In some instances, you might say, you know what, you're 17 years old, I'm done arguing with you. You are going to have to be responsible for this yourself, and it's up to you. Let's say it's schoolwork, for example. This is what I expect. You're not doing it. That means that you're not going to get that shortcut to uni, and it means that you are setting yourself up for a very different life to the one that you've told me you want. Yeah. Then again, you might say, you know what, there are some decisions that parents have to make, and this is one of them. And I wish that it wasn't like this, but until we can work on this effectively together, it's my rule that stands. Let's say it's alcohol, okay, or consumption of other sort of illicit substances. You might just say, we don't do that. We don't do it. It won't happen in my house, and I'll do everything I can to protect you. It's illegal. It's not safe. It's damaging your brain. It's putting you at tremendous risk. It's putting others at risk. I'm not going to be associated with it. It won't happen. Yeah. And so it really just does. It does depend. It might be the boyfriend sleeping over or the girlfriend sleeping over. You know, everybody's got their own morality and their own views on that. But in my home, my girls know you don't bring the boyfriend home. I mean, he can come over and hang out, but there's a certain time, and once we hit that time, he goes home. Yeah. And there's no one indoors, in bedrooms with doors closed and all that sort of stuff. We've got rules, and that's how it will always be in our home. But there's a whole lot of other rules that are, you know, look, you guys decide. We've talked it through again and again and again. Clearly, I'm not getting through. I don't have the energy to fight this one.
So with that, it would come down to the moral conviction and the strength and the importance of that moral conviction and the potential significant consequences of going the wrong way.
Right. So
you weigh that up.
Exactly. I call it principles versus preferences. Yeah. Some things on principle, I'm the parent, and these are my principles, and that's all there is to it. Yeah. And some things are preferences. I'll leave it to you. I've got a preference, you've got a preference, but nobody's really going to be harmed or damaged.
Yeah. Good.
You might not do as well in year 12 as you'd like to. You might end up in this situation or this situation or blah, 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 but it's a preference, not a hard and fast principle, moral conviction kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think about, say, that homework example too, because in the long term, there are consequences. But one moment here and there in the midst of that fight is not going to necessarily make that big difference, because you might give a little bit of slack and then their brain kicks in for themselves and they go, actually, this isn't what I want to do it that way, and start to study again, because the consequences of this one choice may not be actually bad, and gives them time.
Yeah, and we've got to have a conversation at some point about the pressure that we put our kids under for year 12, by the way, because, I mean, you think about it, think about how many of us are actually doing now what we wanted to do when we were in year 12. How many of us have grown up, gone to uni, had the perfect career, and everything just sort of worked out? Now, I know that some people are, but most of us Nuh-uh.
I'd be doing your taxes right now if I did what I wanted to do when I was in grade 12.
Well, and the several years after.
Yeah.
Finished you changed the degree partway through, didn't
Yeah,
you?
I did. I was going to be an accountant since I was 13.
Until 3 years after uni, you'd be stretched out on the couch and she'd be giving you therapy as well. That's right. Life didn't turn out for you at all, did it, Suze?
No, it's true. But I like. There's a lot of really gold gems in what you've a lot of gold in what you've told us
And gems.
today, and gems,
Golden gems.
And I think a couple of really good keys in what you've said. Remember what it was like to be a teenager. The 3 E's that you gave us, I think, is a really critical point.
Yeah, explain, explore, empower.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And take the change of relationship as it comes. We're not always to be the authority figure, but continue to be a guide through those teenage years. Brilliant.
And if all else fails, show them your badge.
It won't stop the bull, but it'll make you feel better.
I'm the parent.
I think I was a bit of a questionable teenager, but I the bull reminds me of my sister in the morning when she was a teen. In fact, my mum was telling me as a grown woman, don't mess with her in the morning until after she's had a coffee. Dr. Justin Coulson, thank you so much.
That's great. Thanks, Scott.
For more resources on this and loads of other parenting topics, including books, DVDs and online resources and courses, go to happyfamilies.com.au. And if you were thinking you might like to have Dr. Justin Coulson speak for your group or school, you can find more info on how that can happen at justincoulson.com.